He was called a fool, then a conqueror, and finally, a demon. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Oda Nobunaga, one of the most powerful and honestly, one of the most controversial figures in all of Japanese history. This was a man of shocking contradictions, a guy who would burn down sacred temples but also open up free trade. He was both a brutal tyrant and a brilliant visionary. So you look at this portrait and you see a composed, powerful man, totally in control. But the era he lived in, oh, it was anything but. He came to power in a Japan that had been torn apart by more than 100 years of civil war. This was a time where your ambition was basically measured in blood, and betrayal was just part of the game. And this guy, he earned himself some pretty wild nicknames. But the one that really sticks? Demon King of the Sixth Heaven. I mean, how on earth does a historical leader get a name like that? Well, to understand the Demon King, you've got to understand the world that made him. We are talking about the Sengoku period, which basically means the Warring States period. For over a century, Japan had no real central government. The whole country was just shattered into dozens of little territories, each run by a powerful warlord, a daimyo, and they were all constantly fighting each other for more land and more power. It was just an age of endless, brutal conflict. Okay, so into this violent world, Oda Nobunaga is born, heir to a pretty minor clan. But here's the thing. If you were placing bets back then on who would one day rule Japan, you would not have picked this guy. As a young man, nobody saw him as a promising leader. In fact, he was known by a very different type. Yeah, this really says it all. On one hand, a young lord was supposed to be this pillar of tradition and good behavior. But Nobunaga, he was running around in bizarre, mismatched clothes, hanging out with commoners, dancing in taverns. He couldn't stand all the stuffy ceremonies of the samurai class, and that's how he earned his famous nickname, the Fool of Owari. And his total contempt for tradition was never more obvious than at his own father's funeral. I mean, this is a huge deal, a very solemn occasion. He shows up late, dressed all wrong, and then, instead of respectfully offering incense, he just grabs a handful and chucks it at the altar. It was such a shocking act of disrespect. Everyone was convinced he was totally unfit to lead. Turns out, they had profoundly underestimated him. Because this so-called fool was about to launch one of the most audacious campaigns in history. After his father died, he just systematically eliminated all his rivals within his own clan and took complete control of his home province. The fool was gone, and in his place stood a warlord with terrifying ambition. So that's the big question, right? How does this guy go from being a local joke to a serious contender for ruling the entire country? Well, the answer lies in one single legendary battle that changed absolutely everything. So in 1560, one of the most powerful daimyo around, a guy named Imagawa Yoshimoto, is marching on the capital, Kyoto, with a massive army of 25,000 men. And to get there, he has to go right through Nobunaga's territory. Nobunaga, he can only pull together about 3,000 soldiers. The odds were just impossible. His own advisors were begging him to surrender. He refused. Instead of defending, Nobunaga did the unexpected. He went on the attack. He actually used a huge thunderstorm for cover, snuck his tiny army right up to the Imagawa camp, and launched a surprise assault. It was total chaos. And in the middle of all that confusion, Imagawa Yoshimoto himself was killed. It was an absolutely stunning victory against impossible odds, and it instantly put Oda Nobunaga on the map. Right after this incredible victory, Nobunaga got himself a new personal seal. And what it said was unmistakable and kind of chilling. Tenka Fubu. It means all the world by force of arms. This wasn't just about defending his home anymore. This was a declaration. He was going to conquer and unify all of Japan. Just look at this map. It shows you the insane success of his campaign. That little purple spot, that's his territory in 1560. The huge gray area, that's what he had conquered by the time he died just 22 years later. In 2 decades, he took control of nearly a third of Japan, something nobody thought was even possible. But how he ruled was just as revolutionary as how he fought. Nobunaga's rule was really a study in contrasts. On the one hand, he was this brilliant innovator who was basically dragging Japan's economy and military into a new age. On the other hand, he was a ruthless tyrant who would crush anyone and anything that got in his way. See, his vision went way beyond the battlefield. To pay for his armies, he started these free market policies, breaking the power of old guilds. To lead those armies, he promoted guys based on their actual ability, not their family name, which was a radical idea that made sure his men were loyal to him. And in battle, he saw the potential of firearms. Organizing his riflemen in rotating lines just unleashed these constant volleys that could tear traditional samurai charges to shreds. He was a true revolutionary. And yet, for every innovative policy, there was an act of shocking brutality. This armor isn't just some cool museum piece, it's a symbol of the warlord who believed that the only way to unify the country was through absolute, unrelenting force. And this is where he earns that Demon King title. When the super-powerful warrior monks on Mount Hiei decided to side with his enemies, Nobunaga didn't just defeat them. No, he surrounded the entire mountain monastery and burned it to the ground. He slaughtered an estimated 20,000 men, women, and children. The message could not have been clearer. If you defy Oda Nobunaga, you will be wiped from the face of the earth. So by 1582, Nobunaga is at the absolute peak of his power. He controls the capital, all the most vital parts of Japan. Total unification is right there within his grasp. And then, in a single morning, it all came crashing down. He was staying at this temple in Kyoto called Honnoji, getting ready to lead some more troops to one of his campaigns. He wasn't expecting an attack, not deep inside his own territory, so he only had a few dozen bodyguards with him. He was completely vulnerable. The attack didn't come from a rival clan. It came from inside. His own general, Akechi Mitsuhide, turned his entire army around and marched right on the temple, surrounding it. Nobunaga, the great conqueror, was trapped by one of his most trusted men. As the temple burned down all around him, Nobunaga fought back, but he was hopelessly outnumbered. Seeing there was no escape, he retreated into the flames and committed seppuku, the ritual suicide of a samurai. In all the chaos and fire, his body was never found, adding one last mystery to his violent life. So, Nobunaga died just short of his ultimate goal. He never became the one and only ruler of a unified Japan, and yet his legacy is absolutely undeniable. He's the one who broke the back of the old feudal system and laid the foundation for the peace that would finally come. You know, there's a famous Japanese saying that sums it all up perfectly. Nobunaga pounds the rice, Hideyoshi kneads it, and Ieyasu eats it. Nobunaga did the brutal, bloody work of shattering the old world. His successors, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu, were then able to take the pieces he left behind and finish the job of unification. So in the end, who was Oda Nobunaga? Was he a visionary revolutionary who dragged Japan out of a century of darkness? Or was he a merciless tyrant who burned the world just to build a new one? His story doesn't really leave us with easy answers, but with one of history's most compelling and complex questions.